anyhow, I never really got involved with the main church service because really the whole thing bored me to tears. It certainly wasn't something that a young person wanted to be involved in, but we used to have a young people's group. It continued. The one that I became a Christian at continued, and it was really the only place that I had I could grow as a Christian, and it was very much just in someone's home. Lots of kids. I mean, there used to be kids sitting on the floor, and adults started to come along as well, and into the sort of outflowing from the main room because there were so many people used to attend, and God was doing lots of things, and many people, especially youngsters, were becoming Christians, and whole families were becoming Christians at this time. But there was a real atmosphere of grace and of freedom. The music was lively, but it wasn't so much the music and the lively music, and there was good, if you like, teaching, which I know Christians always go on about, but it wasn't just that. It was the sense of belonging, the sense of people actually caring, and that was the thing that had always struck me, was that I was accepted. No one ever said, oh, you've got to stop doing this, you've got to stop doing that. They basically said, God will deal with these things, and God did deal with these things. And whereas at one time I could hardly say anything without a swear word in it, I just suddenly found that I wasn't swearing, and that if I went to swear, it was almost had to force myself, whereas before I couldn't stop myself. And the same happened much with the drinking. I'm not saying I was alcoholic, but I was getting quite close to being that way. I certainly was excessively drinking regularly, and was getting to a point where I couldn't really go out and enjoy myself unless I'd had some drinks. But gradually it became less of a problem. I had other interests for a start, and the desire to go out and get drunk just wasn't there anymore. It didn't happen overnight, and there were times when I used to, but it was always emphasised to me that it was what God was doing in my life, not about me forcing myself to change. And over the period of time those things dropped off, and there's still lots of things wrong with me, so I don't think that everything is right, because it's not. And anyhow, in 1980 I married Janice, and we went on and had 4 wonderful children. During that time, a new church came out of the old one where we became Christians, a church that was trying to be more relevant to young people and to the culture that was around us. And at that time it was still very much a family atmosphere, and things were very informal. The leadership was very informal. It wasn't really there. There was a lot of consultation and a real sense of community. But over that time we felt we needed to be like every other church and have a leader. And we had a good man come, but already things were starting to change and to become more formal, if you like, and less. Although the services seemed spontaneous, there was much more formality to it. And about I must have been about 13 years or so into the new church. No, it wasn't as long as that. 10, 12 years into this new church, I sensed that God was. Oh, actually, I'd forgotten the part. Me and Janice went off to Bible college before we had any children. We spent just over a year there, and Janice became pregnant with David, who we lost recently, as you know. And we left Bible college and came back to home. Forgive the good clock. And at the Bible college we learned lots about healing, and we saw lots of people healed and things like that. So it was run by an American guy who was very much into the word of faith, and I'm sure lots of my American friends have come across this, and it inspired us. And my faith at that time was very sort of I don't know, almost push button type thinking. Though it didn't always work like that, that was the way I saw things, and it was all about knowing the knowing the scriptures, but I'm not sure there was a huge amount of depth to it, and I think that some of this only comes through the struggles of life. I'm not sure much depth in it now, but there certainly wasn't an awful lot of depth in it then. And anyhow, eventually it came about that I moved to a small village and became part of the membership, the leadership team there, and we saw a small village church of about 12, 13 people go to about 30, 40 people. But over a period of time, again, things started to change. I never felt comfortable again, totally comfortable, because although there were lots of people there I cared about, it didn't have that atmosphere that I'd had early in my Christian life, where we would meet in one another's house, we would go out and do things, that we could just turn up on people's doorsteps, and there was not that sort of attitude. It was a much more formal, old-fashioned style of church where things were done in a certain way. And although we tried changing things, it's one thing to change things, but changing people's attitudes is the different thing. And really, for me, Christian faith is not about just about going to church on Sunday. It's not about not doing this or not doing that. It's about a whole lifestyle. It's about relationships with people, relationships with God. And the most important part, really, of the church is the interaction that happens within the body of Christ. And anyhow, I became a little disillusioned with this, and then in 2001, I think it was, I left there and started meeting in my home with just a few friends, because we wanted to find a sense of community. And we would meet on a Saturday afternoon, because some of the people that attended were going to other meetings on Sundays and things. And for me, the church was never just the building, it was the people. And it didn't really matter if people went one place on another day. That was of no consequence to me. And I wasn't the leader. It was in our house, and sometimes I would share, but it was very much, we would meet and have a meal together. That was the big thing. We would share a meal, and the kids would come in. There wasn't a huge amount. I think up to the most we had about 20 of us at one point. But the wonderful thing was we'd have new people every now and again, and by the time we'd finished eating together, we knew them. And when we then broke, and then we spent some time just sharing what was going on in our lives, and we would look at the scriptures, but it was much more as it came about, if you like. Someone would have a problem, and we would be talking, and someone would say, well, it says something here, and we would start talking about that and how it applied to us. And but it was an atmosphere of acceptance again, and of care, not of trying to force people into boxes, but of allowing God to do what God wanted. And this went on for a couple of years, and then I became ill in 2000 and late 2005, and we kept going for another year until my illness stopped it. And then, of course, this was a real challenge to my faith, and I will talk about this solely in another video, because it's an important part of what's happened in my life. But then we lost David in 2008, and we started our old church, which we'd come from, was just so caring and loving towards us, and did everything they could to help us, and we started to attend there whenever we could. But again, my illness has become a problem, and I can't do that. But attending church has never been the main thing for me. As I said, it's been the relationships, and the Christian faith isn't about attending church, isn't about just all of the outward things we do. It's much more to do with that ongoing relationship with God, with other people outside the church, and particularly with other Christians, and about encouraging one another. In the Bible it talks about lots of one anotherings: love one another, care for one another, give to one another, be forgiving to one another, exhort one another, and all of these things which we're supposed to do, but the traditional church stops. And that's really where I'm at with my Christian faith at this time. I will have to stop because the 10 minutes is up. I will speak again.